Hello, welcome back. It's Maria Davies here again, continuing my tips on overcoming the fear of public speaking so that you can do the same as I have done and speak confidently in public to thousands and thousands of people. So the second thing I want to talk about in this second of my series of tips is about you overcoming those barriers that prevent you. First of all, we looked in the first tip about you defining your reasons for doing this. The second thing is looking at those fears. Now, a lot of people say, oh, I'm really nervous about speaking in public and I'm afraid of doing so, which is a little bit strange really, because you get that same person spouting off in front of all of their friends and they have no fears at all, when really speaking in public is just the same. It's just talking in front of a bunch of friends. Well, you can imagine that they're your friends even if you don't know those people. So what are the barriers that prevent you from doing it? Why are you afraid? Well, before we look at that, let me say to you, I would like you to relabel. Instead of saying you're afraid of speaking in public, I would like you to say that you're excited about speaking in public. Because when you think about it, the feeling of being afraid and the feeling of being excited, they are exactly the same feeling. The butterflies in your stomach, the sweaty palms, the feeling of, oh, what's going to happen? It's excitement as well as nerves. So just think about it as being excited by the anticipation. So once you've relabeled it, then you need to think to yourself, what is it that is making you a little bit nervous? What are those fears? Can you define what it is that you're concerned of? Now, we'll address some of those nerves. The first thing is that people say to me, well, I'm afraid of forgetting what I'm going to say. Okay, if you break down the reasons why you might be afraid, and you think, well, one of the reasons is I'm afraid of forgetting what I'm going to say, then there are ways of overcoming this. You can overcome it by being prepared, by going over and over again what it is that you're going to say. So once you know what you're going to say and you've gone over it over and over again till it goes through your head and it's automatic, you know exactly the sequence of events and what you're going to say, then you're less likely to forget, and that will take some of the fear away. However, you can also have some notes with you when you speak in public. Now, personally, I don't like to speak with notes, but let's say you have some notes in front of you. And what you can do is just glance down at those notes if you need to. However, I prefer not to have notes, and in some later tips what I will do is I will share with you how I remember what I'm going to say so I can speak without notes, because when you speak without notes it makes you look an awful lot more professional. However, you can keep some notes with you and you can refer to them if you need to. I do believe though, if you do have notes with you, you will always refer to them and you'll use them as a crutch. So it's best if you don't have the notes. So keep watching these tips, because later on I'll share with you how to do it without notes. That's how the professionals do it. And then the other thing I want to say is that if you forget your words, the public don't know that you've forgotten. You're the only one that will know if you start to say something out of sequence. So remember that you know what you're going to say. The audience doesn't know what you're going to say anyway, so they're not going to know that you've forgotten. So that's about forgetting words. I will address those a little bit more later on. Another thing that people say that they're nervous of is, what if somebody asks me a question I don't know the answer to? What if people start to heckle me? Again, I will address those later on. There's no reason to be afraid of people in the audience when you know how to use them. In fact, you can use them to your advantage if you get people heckling you, if you get people asking you questions that you don't know the answers to. So a little bit later on we will address those in some later tips too. So those are some common reasons. Sometimes I've had people come to me and say, I'm afraid of, and they'll come up with something totally irrational, like, I'm afraid of falling off the stage. Well, there's little I can tell you about that other than keep away from the edge of that stage if that's one of your fears. But the first thing is to get down in front of you on paper, what is it that you're afraid of? Because if you analyse what you're afraid of, then you can go a long way towards thinking, right, what do I need to do to overcome that particular fear? In other words, if you know what your fear is, then you can start to prepare for it. I've spoken about some of the common fears, and we will be addressing those a little bit later on, but I will address a lot more of them in my tips that you can get at www.laddersofsuccess.com. If you sign up for those regular free tips, then you will have those delivered to your email very regularly. But I will also speak to you about some of those other fears in later tips as well. So move on to the next tip now, and we'll start addressing some of those too.